Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Russo, the Chamber's Chief Communications Officer. I'm thrilled to be with you this afternoon, and I haven't seen this room from this view, so I hope everyone's enjoying our newly renovated space and bringing the conversations to life with some powerful visuals as well. I am joined by a distinguished panel of women leaders. If you have not read their bios, I suggest that you do. Very impressive backgrounds. And just to kick off our conversation, I kind of want to level set on the status of women leaders today and what's changed, in your opinion, about being a woman leader today versus where you might have started out. Anyone, you want to start, Gina?
So first of all, good afternoon and happy International Women's Day, and thank you to the Chamber for having me and FedEx here this afternoon to talk about really important issues. So I'm going to start with what we've seen during the pandemic, and I think that many of us know that during the pandemic, I think women lost about 11.9 million jobs compared to about 10.1 million jobs lost by men. And this is really in stark contrast to what we've seen in other recessions where men typically have had higher job loss and unemployment rates. And we can spend a whole lot of time talking about men and the tragic situation with them out of work, but that's not what we're here for today. A lot of what we're seeing with respect to women and moving out of the job market can be attributed to many things. I mean, women are leaving jobs for some of the same reasons as men are, but we know that women typically have family responsibilities and childcare responsibilities, so there is an unequal or unfair family support system for women. Networking and mentoring for women, especially in male-dominated kinds of jobs, is also a problem. And then, you know, when women entrepreneurs access to capital for investing in their businesses, we've also seen a lot of issues there. But I think one of the big issues is the family care responsibilities that women have taken on, especially now during this time. Yeah.
Thank you, Gina. Sherry?
Hi, everybody. Sherry Carter. So happy to be here, and thank you to the Chamber for inviting us to be here. And what a spectacular room full of wonderful, powerful women. And, you know, we're all coming out of the pandemic. And I think everybody wants to think we're out of it. But I tell you, it's slow go in many respects. So I do all of the charitable giving for the Boeing Company and all of the community engagement and support all over the world. And it has been a real challenge during the COVID times to figure out, you know, exactly what we could do to help, how much we could do to help, and you can never do enough. And what you find in a lot of these communities is that the women are really the power behind all of these community activities and these organizations. So we have seen a strong, strong support system with women all over the world, really trying to find a way to help during the time, and now coming out of it. You know, professionally, I think what we're seeing, especially in the Boeing Company, even though we've hired 15,000 new employees last year, and this year we're on track, we're going to hire 10,000 more, you just don't know what's important to people that you're hiring. But one of the things that we know is that flexibility is key. So I think companies are having to rethink flexibility, remote work, and really figure out how we meet the employees' needs and the business needs all at the same time.
Great, thanks for those. Carla?
So my observation from when I started, and I'm representing the federal government, so I want to thank the Chamber and happy to represent NASA here on the panel, is I feel like we're in a real optimistic period right now for women, at least in the STEM areas. NASA right now has about 40% of its workforce are women. And in the STEM communities, we have a number of women in the highest levels of senior executive service and science. Our science mission director, our deputy associate, deputy assistant administrator is a woman, former astronaut as well. And so if I contrast to when I started in procurement or in government, I now see people that look like me, women and people of color in positions of authority and leadership. And so I feel very encouraged from where I was when I started in the early 90s. And NASA's doing quite a bit to target women, and all the way from kindergarten all the way through college and high school with internships. And COVID has presented quite a few opportunities for NASA because we've been able to do distant internships for some women that maybe wouldn't have had access to do some of the STEM internships. We ship computers out to them, and so I'm looking at it as a positive. We've found ways to make a more flexible workplace and more accessible. So excited about that.
That's great. Sarah, as you self-introduce and start with your opening comments, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about McKinsey's 8th Women in the Workplace report and some of the themes, and then I'll come back down to hear people talk about that. Go ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you, and it's so personal for me. I'm just coming back from maternity leave as well, so having my first child, my daughter, and so I'm so excited to think about really the state of the world for her and for me, and coming back and just the support of these wonderful women on this panel. So I'm really privileged to be a part of McKinsey's work on women in the workplace. And as mentioned, this is our 8th year of doing this research. We have worked with more than 300 companies representing more than 12 million employees. This year, something new, we had more than 40,000 responses from employees directly and had done pretty extensive qualitative research with employees as well. And one thing this year that really stands out and that I think you heard from panelists here is what we're calling the Great Breakup. And so there is a downside to this that I'll talk about, but I personally see it as actually women exercising their power and their choice, because they are seeing that there is a need for women in the workplace. There are tons of jobs open, what we just heard about in some of the earlier remarks. And so women are asking for work to fit what they are looking for. So we heard a few things on that in particular. So first, that women leaders want to advance as much as men do, but are facing greater headwinds. So as you think about women making it past that first broken rung, which was one of the findings from our earlier research about women being promoted at the first level, much less than men, we are seeing a consistent and just as strong desire for career advancement, but not the support that helps get them there. So that's one first piece. Second is a feeling of being overworked and under-recognized, and that this is core business activities, but is also support, mentorship, sponsorship, that women leaders are investing much more time than men in these absolutely business critical activities, but are not being recognized for those things, and so are feeling some resentment about that and are looking for organizations that will support them in that way. And then really next, women want a better culture, including flexibility as described. So we see half of women leaders are saying that flexibility will be their primary driver of deciding to stay or go in their job versus about a third of men saying that. And that this is not just about hybrid or work remotely or be in the office. This is flexibility to be able to take care of what's important to them as mentioned here. We are seeing, though, that in our responses, only 1 in 10 women were saying they wanted to be in a job on site with no flexibility. So as you think about that real paradigm shift and what that means for employers who want to win this war for women talent, thinking about flexibility in a different way is going to be so important. So those are a couple of the big findings from this year.
The theme we keep hearing is this flexibility theme, and the pandemic has certainly been a hard 3 years in so many different ways, but one of the silver linings, I think, is really accelerating the trend that was underway about hybrid workplaces, about optimizing performance in different environments. You know, sometimes I need that reset day at home to really catch up and be thoughtful, and then I need the meetings in the office and thinking about that. So that's a positive trend coming out of the pandemic, and flexibility is a two-way street. I've always said that, right? That we besides just women, everybody needs some flexibility and empathy from their environments. What are some examples from your organizations that are tips or things that are working with fostering kind of the productive hybrid workplaces or flexibility in general? Is it mindset or any tricks, things that are working a little bit better? Does anyone want to jump in on that?
I
Go
think
ahead,
it's
Sherry.
mindset and acceptance, you know, that it is a common practice now, and that you can be just, if not more productive with that flexibility mindset. And it's been hard for me. I've been in the workplace a long time, and I've managed a lot of different places and a lot of different people. So my expectation coming back was, okay, everybody's going to come back. Everybody's going to want to be in the office every day. And I've had to really adjust my mindset as a leader and take advantage also of that reset date sometimes that you talk about. That really does help me to be able to be away from a nonstop day of meetings and conversations to really think. So, you know, I've found some real positives there too.
I think that's right, Carla. We were talking backstage. Not everybody can do that. Certainly at the chamber, a lot of my colleagues today are working at home, and the ones you see here couldn't work at home today because they're serving our members and our community by being here and doing those jobs. And it's so important to have that balance right and have empathy for all perspectives.
It is, and the flexible workday or the agility we have with the workday, we found productivity has gone way up.
Yeah.
In some cases, people are working in the evenings and not in the mornings. We find people, you know, if they have childcare needs, they need to drop off a child or pick up a child. We have education, people that want to get additional education. And so from a NASA perspective, we're tapping into more talent where the talent exists. They don't necessarily have to move to one of our 10 centers, but we're going to wherever they are and getting that talent. We do have opportunities to come into the office if they choose to. So if they're supporting some kind of an operational need like the International Space Station, that's more of a, you have to come in every day. But for like procurement, folks usually come in like once a day. People are really happy with that. And I think that it's this mindset that we measure productivity and contribution to mission, not did you show up to work? Are you filling a seat? We've also seen opportunities for savings with respect to facilities. I think I was mentioning in the backstage too. We're able to give up some of that really expensive office space and consolidate and then share office space. And then for our younger women, we're even having them share jobs, job sharing. Back to the Future in the 80s and 90s, we used to do that a lot. Where people might have maternity leave or even paternity leave. We're finding men are taking time off as well. So I see a lot of optimism in leveraging this new environment.
And I just add that, you know, we're in an industry in the logistics business where, you know, women don't necessarily have the luxury of not coming into the office. I think the figure is that there are about 39% of women in logistics, and it's going up. 39%, I believe, in 2020 and 2021. That's up to 41%. So there are a lot of women who are working in this business who, again, don't have the luxury that some of us who are in offices have that flexibility. And so in those instances, I think it's really important to make sure that we're providing appropriate benefits to support them, to make their work environment as, you know, accommodating as we possibly can. And so those are the things that, you know, we try to keep in mind when you're dealing with folks who are delivering all of your packages while we sit here.
If you're delivering the
enjoy.
package, you can't work from home, right? And we have to have a lot of empathy for that, but find other ways to demonstrate flexibility and benefits in that job. So let's turn to how we're developing the pipeline of women leaders in our organizations. Carla mentioned interest in STEM. You, Gina, mentioned increase in women in logistics. Anybody want to start? Sarah, we haven't heard from you in a while about how are we fostering, what programs are we doing to encourage the pipeline and grow the pipeline of women or underrepresented people?
Absolutely. So I think what our research has found is that most important point in the pipeline is actually this first rung. So when we think about the progression from entry level to manager, which then becomes the jumping off point, obviously, for how many women we see in the C-suite and beyond, for every 100 men who are promoted from entry level to manager, we're only seeing 87 women promoted and only 82 women of color. And so this is actually the point at which there is the greatest disparity. So McKinsey ourselves has thought quite a bit about this because we see our incoming cohorts are in most places majority women at this point. But we were then still not seeing the progression that we wanted through the pipeline, and that number was not staying the same over time as it could or as it should. And so thinking about their intervening at the specific moment. So for each of our organizations, it may be different. This is of obviously our 300 companies with whom we've worked closely, but to understand what is the falling off point and what are the very targeted interventions you can make at that point. So for us, that became about sponsorship in particular, so helping women find those who could create opportunities for them, and then actually really rewarding that for senior leaders, and creating management training specific to that cohort as well. And so we have seen real success from that, but I think it comes down to where are you in your pipeline seeing the biggest break, and what can you do to get very specific at that point.
Great, let's go down the line. Carla?
So NASA, we do target women at early career, but then we also assign mentors. And so mentorship happens at NASA from entry level all the way through the executive level. And I think that provides a support system. We have what we call an employee resource group called Women of NASA, and we like acronyms at NASA. And we provide a support not just about the workplace, but even in the home. How do you balance that work-life, family balance? One of the other things I need to mention is inclusion is one of NASA's core values, along with like teamwork, integrity, safety. So inclusion is very important to NASA to be able to look at underrepresented groups, at women, people that are other abled. And so we kind of, from the top down, bend over backwards to make sure people feel a part of the organization. However, to your point, we do see once you get to the leadership positions where we might have about a 50-50 split when we start, women in leadership positions goes down to about 30% in mid-career, but then it ticks back up to about 40% when we look at our executives. And so this includes those of us that support the mission, like with procurement, or our CFO is actually a woman, or say finance, as well as the STEM jobs. So we're studying that, and we're looking for ways that I'll say that first rung that you're talking about, how to make sure that women maintain pace with men in that area. Then we think that mentorship's a big part of that.
Sherry?
You know, I think we all have similar experiences internally, and then externally, which is what I focus on, reaching into the communities, really identifying those organizations, those STEM organizations that we can support. We support every year almost 300 organizations that are focused on STEM learning. And last year alone, 2021, we reached 2.7 million young women in STEM learning. So that is a huge focus of ours, really thinking about workforce development, thinking about inspiring these young women to think about aerospace and wanting to be part of that kind of career track. But also internally, we have a strong mentoring focus with our Boeing Women in Leadership, and really kind of reach in and reach out to try to focus on empowering, inspiring women.
So a lot of the same comments here. I think what's also important is that, you know, women have to, when you get into these positions, we have to bring other women along. Mm-hmm. That's first, because, you know, we understand the needs of women in the workplace. And I think a lot of companies are looking at more family-friendly policies. We've heard maternity leave and paternity leave. There's a real need for support for mental health and wellness for women and women of color. You know, times 10, everything we're talking about, and recognizing some of those specific microaggressions that women of color do have to deal with in the workplace. I think DEI is critically important, and we all talk about that today, but it is also important to make sure that that work is not falling disproportionately on women, leaders, and employees. We all have a role in making sure that we're managing that, and then just constantly investing in our employees. That's what we do, training and education to make sure that we're developing those skill sets in this changing new world that we have. Now, one point that I do want to make is that there's a lot of conversation about the changing importance of college degrees. And I am a person who, and I understand that, I believe about 45% of Americans have college degrees, but I don't think every job needs a college degree. But for me, I'm pushing that college degree, especially if my son is listening, because I think it's important for us to maintain our competitiveness globally. And just to kind of quote from one of my favorite plays, Hamilton, you know, we all, including women, want to be in the room where it happens. And I think any policies or programs or training that helps us to do that are important.
I just want to piggyback on that from a regulatory perspective. One of my jobs is on the Federal Acquisition Council for the FAR Council. And as we start to look at across the federal government, relaxing standards for degrees, there is a concern that does exist that the relaxation will happen for minorities and women, and it'll be disproportionate. And then we do watch that because we want to be very careful that we are inadvertently disadvantaging the people that we've tried to support all these years with underrepresented groups by saying you don't need a degree, but it's okay for you to have a degree, and that we look at that particular job series or the particular skill set as opposed to the person for what we need degrees for, because you could throw the baby out with the bathwater so easily.
Perspective on that. So as I said at the outset, you've all reached high levels in your careers. What's a piece of advice you want to give to our audience, to women in general or other underrepresented groups? Does anybody want to go first?
I can start. I would say, I think as mentioned, you know, women are doing the lion's share of the work to support colleagues in the workplace. We see this in the research, and I have felt this. I find real meaning and joy from that. So I think it's two-pronged, is to really continue to lift up and bring with you a woman as you can. Bring someone to the meeting with you. Give them the opportunity to be part of the next big thing, and also make that visible. So don't let that work you're doing to emotionally support others or to be the one who makes flexibility happen for someone else when they need it. Don't let that be invisible and not celebrated. Raise that up as a core part of your leadership and what you're doing, and then you'll get into that flywheel of where it brings you joy, and it's also something that really helps bring people around you to help you be successful and become something then that is celebrated when you are with your broader leadership team.
I'm going to go back to mentors, because in my career, it's more than one mentor. You need to have a network of mentors. Seek people out to give you advice, not even in your own direct profession, but in other professions. And then with that, to your point, bring others along, mentor other people. I believe as women, we have a responsibility to do that. And other than that, you know, that's kind of my stalwart there. My other thing is you take a lateral movement. Everything doesn't have to be a direct promotion. You need to broaden and gain knowledge as well. And so those would be just a couple.
I've heard that called recently build a career portfolio, not just a path, because path implies linear from one step to the other versus a portfolio, which then may present opportunities you wouldn't have otherwise had if you hadn't put yourself in a different context.
Absolutely.
To do some learning and growing. Great. Sherry?
You know, I was thinking a lot about this because, you know, when I think back about my career track, which has been totally unpredictable, growing up on a farm in Georgia, moving to Washington right out of college, finding a way to become relevant, to become needed, to become part of a real team has just taken me to this place in time. Always being authentic I mean, I think for me, authenticity is everything. For me, for the team that I lead, and really thinking about the mentorship, you know, finding someone along the way that may be a moment in time, but you learn so much from one quick conversation. And you don't know that's a mentor moment, but all of a sudden, when you go home and think about it, you know, wow, that's exactly how I need to be thinking or what I want to be doing the rest of my life. And look at your career as an adventure. I really did not want a boring career, so I have not had 35 years in one place. I am not one that wants to just do the same old thing. And I have had a crazy career track, but it's because I love adventure. And to end up at Boeing and have this opportunity at this point in my career has been a real blessing. It's been wonderful.
Right, very inspiring. Gina.
So on that last point, I have had 30 years at FedEx.
But you've not been bored. But you've not been bored.
I have absolutely not been bored at all. And that's why I've stayed there for 40 years.
So don't
30
ever
years.
want to be bored.
It's been great. The boring part is what I think is significant. I would say a few things. First, don't be distracted by the prejudices of others. Your race, your gender are not things to be negatives. They're just what they are. And so move on, let that be somebody else's problem. I believe that we all should find the vanity and the quality of our work, the strength of our relationships, and our commitment to helping others in the community. If you're doing all of that, then you don't have time to worry about what others kind of think or do. And then, of course, develop interests outside of your safety networks. You know, expand the people and the kinds of people and the opportunities to interact and be with people that you normally would not interact with. Push yourself to do those things. And then all of the things that everybody said, have empathy, take risk, you know, bring women along. One point that I do want to make is because we're all on our phones and, you know, 120 or 60 or whatever it is, learn to write, just write this right, because that is a skill and that you will always need for yourself or somebody else. And so those are the things that I put out there as advice.
Okay, so I promised myself I would not be a moderator who wants to be a panelist and answer the question, but I'm gonna do it. I just broke my rule, okay? Which is because I want to pick up on what you said and give my own piece of advice, which I wouldn't have given 5 minutes ago if you hadn't made the FedEx 30-year point, is you have to tell your own story too. And yes, I'm a storyteller, a communicator by day, but it's really a practice that everyone needs to develop. And I say that because I was leaving my last company after 14 years, and I met with a recruiter, and he said, yeah, you're gonna have trouble because you haven't taken a lot of risks in your career. You've been at Discovery too long, you stayed there too long, you didn't show risk-taking. This is having moved my family from the United States to London 4 years, having taken a company public, having, you know, I was so stunned. I had nothing to say in that moment. I was so offended, I was so stunned, I was so surprised. But then I got my story together. And I started telling a story when I would meet people about the risk-taking I had done in my career, about all the growth I had gotten from being at the same company for 14 years. And so really, that's my parting advice, to lose the story. We're out of time. You guys have been amazing and inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going this way.